So my second video on day 2 of make some content every single day for my 34th year of life. It's going to be on what I consider good and bad coaching. I remember I did my first show in 2009. I hired a gentleman called Paul Scarborough, and he helped me diet down. It was all done online, like the majority of coaching these days is. He made me a diet based on certain pieces of information I gave him. He and I discussed and came up with a supplement plan that I ran into the show. There were some things that he wanted to run higher, and I said I'm not comfortable with that, so he said all right. So we decided on that plan together. Then every week I would check in. I would tell him what happened with my body weight. I'd tell him how I felt. And with the progress pictures, he would make little changes every week. And although I was far from an ideal client, as it was my first ever contest, I remember waking up at 2 a.m. in the morning, driving to McDonald's and eating a lot of McDonald's, then getting back in the car, then driving home the next day, doing 5 hours of cardio and a 3-hour leg workout. I wish I was kidding, because it was just that stupid. But I did it. And then I ended up competing. I won. It was a great experience, and that was my first experience with online coaching. Not long after that, I had my first client, and I did it kind of the same way. I wrote up the diet, the training, the supplements, everything was written out based on what I thought that person needed the most. And that's how I've always done my coaching. I always say coaching isn't the initial plan. Coaching isn't the initial diet. It isn't the initial training plan, because there are only so many ways to eat. There are only so many ways to train. Yeah, some are more ideal for some people and some might be more ideal for other people. But at the end of the day, it comes down to losing body fat, maximally gaining muscle, and combining the two. And that's called getting in shape. And even if your everyday person comes and wants to have a transformation is no different to a contest prep. You're dieting down, you're trying to gain or at least maintain all your muscle while you get leaner. And then even though you don't step on stage, your end goal is still essentially bodybuilding. Then you have the off-season circumstance where you're trying to go up in weight while minimizing body fat. There's different arguments towards how much body fat should be gained. Some people believe in a lot more, some people believe in less. Honestly, it just depends on the individual. A young guy in his early 20s who's never done a big bulk before and he's naturally fairly thin, he probably can do with blowing up like 50 pounds one time and then dieting down, then he's got a brand new 20 pounds of muscle. It was worth it for him. But you wouldn't want to take, let's say, a 45-year-old man who has higher blood sugars and maybe some blood pressure issues, who's been bodybuilding for a long time, and say, all right, we're going to bulk you up to 300 pounds and we're going to bring you way back down and you're going to be bigger. Number one, I don't think you probably will be any bigger by the end. Number two, that's a recipe for disaster. And that brings me to what I consider bad coaching. Any coach that says you must take a drug, that's a bad coach. You're not a doctor. Only a doctor can say you must take this drug. And even then, how many people listen to their doctors? How many people go, I'll just do it on my own. I'm not even going to take the medication the doctor requires. However, when people pay a lot of money to a bodybuilding prep coach or off-season guide or whatever, lifestyle coach, whatever you want to call it, that person thinks, well, I've paid this person quite a lot of money and they say that this is safe and this is what I need to do, so this is what I'm going to do. Big no-no. If you knew the amount of horror stories I have heard and I have seen of clients, of coaches getting really damaged, and I don't just mean on the extreme end, you have clients who have cardiac failure. There's one coach out on the West Coast, and this year he had 2 clients with cardiac failure, both in their early 30s. And this coach is known for prescribing, even though he's not a doctor, a gram of tren per week for his various clients. Obviously that'll work. If you take a lot of drugs, you're going to get, up to a certain point anyway, more results. It's just how it goes. But for every reaction, I should say, for every action, there is a reaction. So let's say you're getting more and more results as you go up, you're also getting more and more side effects as you go up. So there's a point where more isn't better. And it is not up to a coach to tell anybody you must take these drugs, especially to females, because a lot of these women come to a coach, they have no idea what's involved. They know they want to get up on stage, especially in bikini, they want to compete, they want to look like the girls they see on stage, so they're going to do whatever. So the coach says, this little pill, this is an Anavar pill. There's no side effects, it's harmless. Just take one every day and it'll help you get leaner and stronger. So the girl goes, oh, okay. So she takes that pill every day. A few months go by and she starts to think, my voice is just like, do I have a sore throat, or why is my throat is just a little bit irritated? And then if they're not smart and they don't stop and they keep going, then they can end up with an enlarged vocal cord. And that's why a lot of female competitors have deeper voices. Do I have a problem with that? Zero. I love female muscle. I love female bodybuilders. I love everything about it. However, what I don't love is when females start taking things under the false pretenses of them being side effect free, because they're not side effect free. It's that simple. You're going to have to pay the piper eventually. So, what should a good coach do? A good coach should, first of all, find out all your medical history, how you've been eating, how you've been training. Also get a rundown of your average day. When is it ideal to eat? When is it not ideal to eat? Maybe if you have a manual labor job for 8 hours a day, you're not able to sit down every 3 hours and eat a meal. Well, that's where the coaching comes in. That's where the coach comes up with an innovative idea, like maybe you have a chicken shake. Some of you who follow me on Instagram have seen my chicken shake. There's nothing new, it's just blended chicken. It's no secret. It's just water and chicken blended, put it in the cooler, and you can drink it down really quick. It's just a more effective, in my opinion, protein shake. But if you're on the road or you can't stop for work, it's a good alternative to a meal. So a coach should help you come up with a plan like that. A coach should help you come up with a good training plan. They should take your injuries into account. They should take your previous training history into account. And they should take the gym facilities you have into account too. However, that doesn't mean that each client needs to have perfectly do this exercise for this many reps and this many sets. Because at a certain point, the athlete has to also think for themselves. So the coach can make a nice outline of how they should train. A good progressive overload is nearly always the right way. Even if you're a bikini girl, if you feel like you need any more muscle on your body, then progressive overload, slowly getting stronger over time, be that with more reps, more weight used, or even less time between sets. It's still overloading compared to what you did last time. That's how you gain muscle. And then the diet should be, I'm not gonna say and if it fits your macros approach diet, because I don't believe in that. There's two extremes, right? There's the people who say, oh, a gram of protein is a gram of protein, and a gram of carb is a gram of carb, so I'm gonna have a bowl of Lucky Charms and a scoop of whey protein. Then you've got the other group that is like, there's 5 foods that work, like chicken breast, sweet potato, nothing else even works. Neither of them are correct. It's somewhere in the middle. So in America, food labels have to be up to, I believe, 75% correct. So if a serving of, let's say, Pop-Tart says it has 400 calories, the FDA will still count it as viable if it had 500 calories or if it had like 300 calories. There's that 25% margin of error which they allow. So especially if you're a smaller female and you're working on, let's say, 1,400 calories a day, and you're using an if it fits your macros approach, think how easy it would be to just blow the diet just because the label on a box gives you the false information. Or you don't weigh it out and you go, oh, one Pop-Tart is one serving. But if you actually weigh out Pop-Tarts, they're not all the same weight even. There are small variances in all of these things. For example, there's a nut butter. I think it was called, I'm not going to say the name. But last year it was very, very popular. It said that it had 4.5 grams of fat per serving and a lot of protein, and the stuff tasted absolutely amazing. Well, they came out with a lawsuit and it actually contained something more like 16 grams of fat per serving. So imagine a small female who was saving up all her macros all day and she goes, all right, for dinner, for dessert, I'm gonna have 3 servings of this nut butter, which is gonna give me like 14-ish grams of fat and it's gonna taste great. I'm really looking forward for it. When in reality, it had like 16 grams of fat per serving times 3. So that's like 40, it's nearly 50 grams of fat. So that girl could have dieted perfectly all day long and then blown it all out of the water on that one, and the client doesn't even know that she's doing something wrong. And then the coach, on the other hand, all they know how to do if they're using an if it fits your macros approach is to say, okay, eat less. So they'll go, all right, pull out 10 carbs or 10 grams of fat. But if you're not working on a level playing field to start with, that's never gonna work. So what should a coach's diet look like? It should have variety. Any coach who says like asparagus, white fish and asparagus is magic over, let's say, 99% fat-free turkey breast and Brussels sprouts. Anyone who says there's a difference, it's not true. There is no real difference. There's nothing hardcore about eating the exact same food 6 times a day. In fact, that's a good way to get a nutritional deficiency, which a lot of these people end up having. And with a nutritional deficiency, then you can end up with a hormonal deficiency and you just have a whole cascade of negative events. So what's a coach to do? Should they say, eat exactly this and this food, take this and this drugs, train this and this way? No. They should listen to the client and between the client's collaboration and their own, come up with a plan that both are happy with. And then each week, the coach has to collect certain data. I like to have clients weigh every morning unless they have an issue with that. Some people have an issue with the scale and that's fine, so they don't weigh every morning, that's cool. But I like to get the averages because every day the body varies a little bit. So if you're only taking the measurement every Saturday, and next Saturday you weigh in, you're actually like a little bit constipated because you didn't digest all your food correctly and the scale says you've gained a pound, when in reality the day before you were like 2 pounds lighter, then the coach may say, okay, I'm gonna have to cut calories because the diet's not working. When in reality the diet is working just fine. So I like to use morning weights. I like to use step counting. Some people like it, some people don't. I don't use it for everybody, but I prefer step counting to cardio because what I found is if you tell somebody do an hour of cardio, they do an hour of cardio. But then as they get more and more tired, as it gets closer to the show, they end up doing less and less other activities during the day. Suddenly they walk their dog a little bit less. Suddenly they just get up and move around less and less and less. Well, if you use a step count, you keep that neat, non-exercise activity thermogenesis, you keep it pretty stable. Of course, every day is going to be a little bit different because there is no such thing as an identical day. But I think that's a good way of keeping track of it. Then it's very important that you get feedback from your clients on how they feel. I mean, all the progress in the world means nothing if they're psychologically falling apart. If your sole goal is to get a client onto the stage and then who cares what happens, then that's not hard to do. That's actually very easy to do. The hard thing to do is get somebody onto the stage, then bring them back without having them blow up, without them having any psychological damage from the process. Because believe it or not, dieting down to contest levels is actually very psychologically and physically stressful. If you look at the studies of natural bodybuilders, hormones drop, stress hormones go up. There's a cascade of events which just have to be handled professionally and carefully. So that gets me to the biggest point. These coaches that just prescribe drugs. I've seen a lot of them recently. And actually, one of them started making posts about me about how safe DNP is. Now, remember when I first started bodybuilding, DNP's been around obviously since the 20s. It's in dynamite, it's rat poison. It works very efficiently because it basically poisons the mitochondria. So your body requires, but it's basically like you're making your body work way harder for everything. Problem is, you take a little bit too much. And I'm talking, instead of a quarter of a gram, so 250 milligrams, I'm talking one day, whoops, you slip and you take a whole gram. You know what happens? You can die. And your body literally overheats. And there are cases of people being in hospital in tubs of ice, and the doctors are just trying to keep them cool. They're trying to stop their body from overheating. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes they just die. There's a lot of deaths in the UK actually, because a lot of young people like to use DMP to get into shape for the summer, and then they go to Ibiza and the other clubbing places and vacation places they like to go. And it's an easy way to get lean. It's a very easy way to get lean. It's impossible really not to get lean. In fact, they did a study before where they had like an obese man just take 1 DMP every day, not change his diet at all. A year later, he was lean. So it does work. However, at what cost? DMP increases body temperature, which then in turn can do things like fry your ovaries if you're a female. So your eggs literally burn out. So right now you're 22, you think, oh, I never want to have children, it doesn't matter. I'll just do whatever. I just want to win. I just want to win this show. So you take it, you get super lean, you do 16 weeks worth of work in 8, you show up, you rock it, you win your trophy, you go home, you feel like the best. A couple of years later, you get married, and then you go and you try and have a child. And you try and you try and you try, and it just doesn't work. And then you go to a hormone specialist and they say, look, I don't know what happened, but your reproductive system is just permanently damaged. You're not going to be able to have a child. There are no viable eggs in your body. Was it worth it then? Maybe. That's not for me to say. That's not for me to say. But it is for me to say that the coach, before they say, here, take this DNP pill, they make sure the client is fully educated on what that drug is. And I don't mean show them one article written by one person that is pro it, because you will find an article pro anything. Anything. Before you make a decision about something, you have to get maybe, I don't know what number, 10 sources, combine all the information together, and then you make your educated decision. You decide. But it's not up to the coach to say you will do this, or you won't do this, or you can't be on the team if you don't take this drug. Because you're not a doctor. That makes you a bad coach. Getting somebody into shape on tons of drugs, and sometimes starvation diets, sometimes not starvation diets. If you're using drugs like that, you don't need to so-called drop the calories. Of course not. You can just take more poison and more thyroid hormone, and in cases more amphetamines. I ran into a coach in the UK last Christmas, and he even named his team after a certain drug. That drug is GHB, so the rape drug. So basically the clients starve themselves all day, and then at night they take some of that, they feel good, they sleep, they get in shape. Of course you get in shape, because one of the biggest battles getting into shape is being able to sleep at night, especially when you're hungry. If you date rape yourself, you're going to sleep probably pretty well. And these people do sleep. You know, it's going to work. But at what cost? I have heard of teams that promote it. And I've seen it. I've seen it in the writing. Openly promote things such as bulimia, making yourself sick. I have seen coaches berate clients, call them fat, call them weak-minded, call them all these kind of names. And then when you look at the diet the coaches wrote for them, it was a macro plan. It wasn't eat this number of ounces of chicken breast cooked in this method with this and this. It wasn't. It was just 150 grams of protein, 150 grams of carbs, 60 grams of fat. So the client's there measuring out everything. And we go back to the point earlier where food doesn't have to be 100% what it says on the label. That's why we stick to basic foods. That's the reason. Because we can be sure that when we have 6 ounces of cooked chicken breast and we cook it in the same method, it's going to have pretty much the same macros as the 6 ounces of chicken that we cooked yesterday in the same method. There you have it. It's not up to a coach to belittle a client. Most people who get into this industry and compete already have self-esteem issues. So what are you doing as a coach belittling them, making them feel bad about themselves? It's the opposite of what 99% need. Now there's always the 1%. There's the 1% that needs that drill sergeant-like coach, shouting in their ear, get it done, suck it up. And there is a time and a place for that, but it's rare. Usually what the client needs is the coach to come with compassion and to come with some kind of emotional intelligence and realize that just saying work harder doesn't work for everybody. And if it does work for you, okay, great. But then after the show, what's going to happen? Because we all have a certain amount of willpower. Let's say this is your level of willpower. Let's say the next person has this level. You get to the show, after the show, if you're all burnt out and every ounce of your willpower has been used up, you're going to binge, you're going to blow up. Which brings me to another topic, which is this cheat meals that coaches prescribe. So my education is actually in psychology. That's what I went to school for. That's why I find coaching online very interesting. I make a relationship with each one of my clients. I get to know them on a personal level. And that totally depends. Each client is different. Some people I have a very small amount of interaction with, some need a lot more, and it can vary throughout the year. So before a show, somebody might need a lot more. Another time a year, maybe they just need a couple of sentences per week in an email just to keep them on track. It's about knowing what that individual client needs from you. Because coaching is not regulated, which is so unusual. It's kind of so funny if you think about it, because you couldn't say, hey, I'm a psychologist, or hey, I'm a doctor, or even, hey, I'm a physical therapist. You couldn't just say, I'm one of those, and then go and start practicing it. But you can say, I'm a bodybuilding coach, so I'm going to prescribe drugs. I'm going to tell you how to feel psychologically. I'm basically going to run the show, but I have no credentials at all to do it. Do you see an issue with that? I see a very strong issue in that, especially when you combine that with people that have usually body image disorders to start with, like the so-called bigorexia, or the guys who never think they're big enough. So they're going to seek out a coach that basically feeds into their disorder. He's going to be like, yeah, let's use 3 grams of testosterone a week and 100 IU of insulin a day. Let's do it. Instead of perhaps coming from a different angle and maybe making them realize that there's another way to still achieve the goals, but perhaps in a safer, healthier way. So I don't know, my talks, it's a little bit all over the place, I understand, but I just see it so often these days. These protocols from coaches. Don't even get me started on the sexual harassment thing. I get sent some of the craziest screenshots where coaches are like, if you send me this and this nude picture, I'll reward you with a cheat meal. I mean, are you for real? Reward somebody with a cheat meal? You've paid them good money for emails on how to get into shape, and you are doing things like that. And the problem is, because nothing is regulated, often these clients kind of think, they nearly think it's their fault. It's like a circle, a spiral of shame. The client feels, it's like when a female gets raped and ends up believing it's her fault. It's not her fault. So when a coach does something disrespectful like that to you, it's not your fault. The only time it will be your fault is if you start initiating it in the first place. If you send your coach suddenly some naked check-in pictures, and I've actually heard of coaches saying, I need all check-in pictures to be naked because I can see the body better. Seriously. You're not on stage naked, are you? That's just an excuse. An excuse to be a perv, an excuse to be a weirdo. But then you do have the other extremes. You have these people that think a coach should be there on demand every 2 seconds. Meaning like text question, answer, text question, answer. And generally those are the clients that usually end up paying the least and then valuing the service the least. I went to a behavioral therapist because everybody can improve, myself included. To a behavioral therapist at the start of this year. I went for 3 months. Each month I paid $800, and for that I had a total of 3 hours with this guy, where we chatted. Actually, what we did is very similar to what I do with a lot of my clients when we chat. You basically talk things through. You get a second set of eyes, and that's what a coach really should be. A coach shouldn't be, you need to do this. A coach should be like, have you considered doing things like this? There is a very big difference. And until people come forward and explain their bad coaching experiences, this is going to continue. And I will give a tip for all wannabe coaches. If you get a client that says, look, for whatever reason, I'm not happy with the coaching, I want a refund. You have 2 options. One, you could say, well, really you have 3 options. One, you could say, no, you get nothing. Secondly, you could go, okay, I'm going to give you a discounted, I'm going to work out how many weeks I coached you for, and I'm going to refund you for the rest of the weeks. That's probably the best approach. Then the most extreme approach would be just to say, I'm just going to give you a full refund. I have been coaching people for 11 years now. It's my full-time job. Besides, I own the gym too, but I still always coach online. I have refunded 3 people in 11 years. 4 refunds. And one of them was because they asked. And 2 of them were because I felt after a couple of weeks of working with them that it was just not the best fit. They had unrealistic expectations of what I should be doing for them. Basically a rent-a-friend, if you will. A coach should be there to answer any questions you have. A coach should be there to review your check-in each week. A coach should be there to adjust your plan as goes. You are not hiring somebody to be your friend at all times. Most people get that. Some people don't get that. And what I've always found the most amusing is generally the people who pay for the least expect the most when it comes to that. And then you're not even coaching anymore. It's like a diluted, strange friendship where a person's hitting you back and forth and you're just going back and forth all the time. That's not what coaching is either. But if you do hire a coach, do so because you truly believe in that person. When I have people who hit me up and say, look, I'm coach shopping, pardon me. What are your prices? I say, sorry, I'm full. Because I'm not interested. I am not interested in somebody choosing a coach based on price. But what if I can't afford it? What if I can't afford your prices? Somebody will say. Well then, go and buy Scott Stevenson's book, Be Your Own Bodybuilding Coach. And I mentioned this in the last video too, and I'll mention it again. Because everything contained inside that book is enough for you to coach yourself. You don't need a coach. This whole getting a coach thing, it's been around. It really started taking off when Instagram started getting really big. I've only been on Instagram for a couple of years. I don't actually personally super like social media in general. I used to like the forums, but once the forums kind of went away, I joined up social media too. But I wish I could say it's always you pay for what you get. But it's not true. But I can tell you something. If you're paying a bigger name coach and you're paying him like $100 a month, I can guarantee you that coach is spending very, very, very little time on you each month. Very little time. Because guess what? He's making good money. And if he's only charging $100 a month, he has to have a lot of clients. So even if he's working around the clock, if somebody has 100+ clients, I don't know, any number that they can't handle. Got 20 clients is too many if you have a full-time other job. I literally sold my gym so I could solely focus on my online training, because that's what I enjoy to do the most. I literally did that to free up time in the day. So these people who do a lot of coaching as their part-time job, that's okay, but only take on as many clients as you can handle, because reputation is everything. Once you get a bad reputation, it won't be long. And you all see it. You see the videos online about different coaches and crazy protocols, and I actually know the truth behind a lot of those, and in a lot of cases it really is true. It is the coach just pushing crazy protocols. Some of the things I've seen from some so-called health conscious coaches is just, it just makes me shake my head, because there is no safe dose of anabolic steroids. That's true, there's no safe dose. But there is a difference between moderate and sensible use while monitoring the body, and with just shotgun the entire body with an array of different drugs where you don't even know what's doing what. And I posted it up before on my Instagram, but a very well-known online coach, he's been online coaching longer than I have. He had a 22-year-old who was getting ready for his first show. He's like 210 pounds at 6'1", so a musty guy, but nothing huge. This kid had sent over his information to this coach, and he had used some steroids before, I think in the range of around 500 milligrams. And the coach sends him back over the protocol to go into the show. It was 3,000 milligrams of combined steroids every single week going into the show. So this kid, who didn't know any better, went from having done about 500 a week to now 3,000. He ran into a few different health issues from that. He actually needed to donate blood. His blood got too thick. The RBCs went too high. He had some blood pressure issues. And as much as they say about receptors upregulating as dose goes up, I really think there is something to be said that if you push the envelope with any drug, your body does, if not build an immunity to it, it's still just not going to respond as well. So best example is Ronnie Coleman, right? He turned natural at like 220 pounds or so, and then he got on all the drugs and he competed at nearly 300 pounds. If you need 3,000 milligrams of steroids to be 220 pounds, and your end goal is to be 250 pounds, what are you going to do? Are you going to take 6,000 milligrams of drugs? I don't know. It's a question I think a lot of people don't ask themselves. What are you going to do? You're going to just keep escalating the dose until something goes wrong with your body? And training is another really, a lot of coaches, from what I've seen, basically send out a diet and send out a drug protocol, and then they send out cardio. They say do 30 minutes of high intensity or lower intensity steady state cardio. And then each week they manipulate those variables. They say a little bit less food, a little bit more drugs, a little bit more cardio. But they don't really do any hands-on work with the training. They don't really ask, are you getting stronger? How's your training? How about you send me a video of your max set, like your last working set of deadlifts, for instance. Because often if those coaches actually got those videos, they would go, oh wait, that client isn't either performing their exercise correctly, they're not pushing hard enough, or a combination of both. Or perhaps they're using horrible form, way too much weight, not stimulating the muscles, and risking injury. Either one is really, no, any of those is very bad. Because I always say bodybuilding is the only sport where people put more focus on drugs than they do on training. You wouldn't hear a cage fighter getting ready for an MMA fight go, training, nah, it's all right. I'm taking 1,000 mg of Tren. I've got 50 milligrams of halotestin every day. Yeah, the training, yeah, that's taken care of itself. I got the drugs right. No, of course you wouldn't, because that would be absolutely ridiculous. And it's just as ridiculous when people put more focus on drugs than they do on the training. And if you look at most coaches' training plans, they either don't have overload built into them, they're really poorly designed, or they don't monitor them at all. They just say, here's a list of exercise, here's a list of rep ranges, go at it. How does that help in the long run? So what are you really paying for? With a lot of coaches, what you're really paying for, and you probably won't want to hear this, but it's the truth. You're paying for somebody to sign off on your bullshit, on your drug abuse. That's what you're paying for. You're paying for somebody to say, yeah, take 1,000 milligrams of tren, it's all good. And the client, as he's sticking himself with the drugs, he's like, yeah, the coach said it's all good, so it's all good. When in reality, nobody knows if it's all good. It might be all good for one person, then the next person it's not all good for. Same with the girls. Some girls can take Anavar and Primabol and they stay very feminine. Other girls, they take a little bit, like a tiny bit of Anavar, and they have all sorts of side effects. And I'm not just talking about voice getting deeper. I'm talking about permanent hormonal changes where there's shifts in their estrogen and testosterone. Females can end up with low testosterone too, you know. A lot of people don't think about that. So a lot of females that use steroids and then they stop them, they end up with permanently low T levels. And most doctors don't check that. So often when I get a female who comes to me and she's like, I don't know, you know, I used to compete, I don't have a lot of energy, I don't feel that good. I say, go and get your hormones checked. And not just your thyroid, but also your testosterone. And a large percentage of the time, their testosterone is low. And then they're prescribed by a doctor, not by me, by a doctor, the right amount of testosterone. And then suddenly they're feeling great again. So I have no problem with coaches that are basically just there for accountability. Here's your plan, here's your 6 meals, your chicken, your rice, your eggs, your oatmeal. Here's your training plan. I want you to hit an hour of cardio each week. And then once a week you check in, the coach says, okay, good work, you know, keep pushing. Don't give in to the cheat meal. That's all right. But the coach who says, okay, you have to take these drugs, that's not okay. And going back to the cheat meal, if you look at the study of Pavlov's dogs, the salivating dogs, he basically conditioned these dogs to salivate at the sound of a bell. So the bell went ding, 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 and the dog started salivating. Well, coaches with the weekly cheat meals are doing the exact same thing. The client starts fixating on that cheat meal all week. They think, okay, I'm eating my tilapia and asparagus all week. And then on Saturday, I can go and have a big cheat meal. That's all they think about. Guess what? Well done. You've just created an eating disorder, because that's what it is. When you're fixated on food like that, that's an eating disorder. There's a difference between being hungry because you're really lean and close to a show, and when your entire life revolves around this so-called cheat meal. You see it all the time on Instagram. Oh, here's my cheat meal, or only so many days to go till this cheat meal, or coach told me to have an extra big cheat meal. I mean, what are you focusing on exactly? I thought the goal is to build your ideal body, to build the performance that you want. I thought that's the goal. Not to give yourself eating disorders. Not to sit around all week thinking, getting on the treadmill thinking, oh, I can't wait for that burger. When in reality, a female's body is so efficient, they're so well designed to survive famine, that a male body, we're made to starve, we're made to die. Like if there's no food left, males quickly shrink up and they die. A female's body is made to survive because we require them for humanity to continue. So a female's body will adapt.